So thank you for those who are on the webinar and those who are watching my video. We'd like to welcome you to our first webinar for the 2020 year, and we're going to be talking about trauma-informed conflict resolution and peer mediation. And our host tonight is Darby Monroe, and I'll let Darby introduce herself in just a moment. I would like to take a moment just to introduce you to the online peer mediation platform, because we are the host for tonight's webinar. And I will just take about 2 minutes of your time just to kind of talk a little bit about what the online peer mediation platform is. So let me see if I can just do this very quickly. Okay, so the online peer mediation platform really is a platform where we specialize in peer mediation and conflict resolution. This is our team, and if you'll notice that Darby and our friend Karen, who's on tonight, are both on the team. So we have a really great team, people who specialize in conflict resolution in all areas of conflict resolution. We were funded by the James Foundation in 2014. We actually received a grant. We were managed by the Association for Conflict Resolution for a year, and now we're managed by the National Association for Peer Program Professionals. We actually have a website, so if you would like to check out our website, there it is. It's peermediationonline.org. We have all kind of great information on our website, but we have 4 main goals that we handle through the platform. Number 1, we provide all kind of resources that are free. You can go to our website for useful links, research, best practices, the peer mediation standards. I don't know if you know that peer mediation does have standards, free curriculum, and also our media. And we have many videos up we think you'll find very useful. Our second goal for the OPMP platform is to provide online training in basic peer mediation skills. And this means that, let's say that you have a new group of peer mediators, you're not able really to train them, or you want to give them some refresher skills, you actually can contact our organization and sign up for our basic mediation modules. There are 10 modules. We actually had a school from Arizona reach out to us yesterday, and they are very excited about using the modules. We also have skill development, where you actually can, if you have a peer mediation group and your peer mediation group needs some role play practice, we can help with that. We actually teach students how to practice their skills, and we give them feedback on their skills. Not going to play this, but actually if you go to our website, there's a 1-minute simulation video from some of our students that shows how mediation works. And we would give you an hour demo how to do this. You would actually be given the license to do the simulation, and those videos would then belong to you. Lastly, this is something we'd like to do in the future, is to offer online peer mediation services to schools that either have a peer mediation program or don't have a peer mediation program. And so we would like to actually partner with schools who have experienced peer mediators who want to either use their students in the online world or would like to receive services. So just some words about student safety. We never have contact with students. The students actually would go through the school. We would help you with this, and we would love to talk to any schools that might be interested maybe in doing this in the future. So we're also looking for partners, schools, and we're looking for trainers or anyone that might be interested in peer mediation. We're always looking for new partnerships. We also provide some services. We offer a 32-hour peer mediation coordinator training. If you would like to become a peer mediation coordinator, we do offer that service. We also offer organizational conflict resolution training for organizations, whether it's schools or businesses or different types of organizations. We are going to be offering restorative teacher-student mediation for school administrators, counselors, and staff members. And then in the future, we will offer mediator mentor training for college students to actually be able to help our high school students. So if you ever have any questions, just contact us. We also have webinars, past webinars, great webinars that you can view. We have a YouTube channel. And then next month, we will actually have another free webinar in February, which is going to be announced by Jason Saylor from Peace Peddlers. So enough about us. We want to now get to our webinar for tonight. Hi, Michelle, welcome. And so I'm going to turn it over to Darby. All right, Darby.
I muted myself. Can you see my PowerPoint? Okay. So tonight I'm going to be talking about trauma-informed approaches to peer mediation. And more resources will be available on peermediationonline.org as well as on my website, Trauma Informed Solutions. A little bit about me. I'm a PhD candidate in conflict analysis and resolution at Nova Southeastern in Fort Lauderdale. I am a certified family mediator, a conflict coach, and I've been a teacher for the past 20 years, mostly in alternative settings. So the majority of the students I work with are at-risk youth who've experienced a lot of conflict and trauma. Tonight, the learning objectives are to identify common causes of ACEs or adverse childhood experiences that peer mediators and educators will see in the classroom or at schools on a regular basis, to be able to describe how a trauma-informed approach can prevent and reduce ACEs in conflict, and to discuss how using a trauma-informed approach can be implemented as peer mediators and educators. So hopefully we've all heard about adverse childhood experiences by now. It was initially brought up by Dr. Folletti, who worked with Kaiser Permanente in California. He studied 17,000 people. It stemmed from his obesity clinic, where he realized some people couldn't lose the weight, and he saw patterns in his patient's childhood. So some of these patterns fall into these categories, whether it was abuse, having a neglectful family, if there was domestic violence and divorce, if there was an incarcerated parent, mental illness in the family, or if there was substance abuse. He created a questionnaire, which you can find online. I know the CDC has a lot of free resources as well as ACEs Connection, to be able to not only take it and see what your own ACE is, but just to get more familiar with it. This is a brief overview. But a lot of our students are dealing with this. Our communities are dealing with this. And it causes, present day issues, but also long-term mental and physical health issues. So when our students are going through whatever they're going through, whether it's in their homes or in the communities, they can have physical responses to these situations. Something I like to go over is the fight, flight, and freeze, because when we see behaviors in schools that we don't like, we usually think of the fighting behaviors. The conflict that's physical, or students that throw things or get out of control. But I also like to say it's important to note students can go into flight mode. They could run. You have our students that just want to leave class, or they could freeze. I think the majority of students go into freeze mode, where they just shut down, might fall asleep. They don't do any work. Teachers may think they're lazy. So these are things to keep in mind when we're dealing with problematic behaviors in classrooms or at schools. It may not be that the child's obstinate. It could be that they're really just in their nervous system, not able to do anything else in the moment. Getting a little bit more into how trauma affects the brain. There's different regions of the brain. So if you look at the hippocampus, I have mild dyslexia, so don't mind me mispronouncing things. That's like, and we were talking about the brain's hand model of the brain earlier. So if you think about that, like this is like your your brain stem, like your reptile brain, and it's a like a bodily reaction, it's survival instinct. And so when you're in that survival mode, or when a student's in survival mode, they really can't tell safe from unsafe. So an example of this is, what if their teacher is talking to them sternly, or an administrator is saying something to them, like this? They may take that as a threat when it's not really a threat. Because they can't tell safe from unsafe. It could be a trigger for them. And a lot of teachers don't always understand that. They think they need to be stricter and hold them accountable, when really they need to like back off a little bit. And then you have your amygdala, which is the reactive part of the brain, where students could be very, very responsive to triggers. And then we have the prefrontal cortex, right? And that's where like the thinking is. So if students are stuck in their brainstem, they're not going to be able to think or focus or pay attention in class and do well academically. They're not going to be able to solve problems or reduce conflict with their peers if they don't feel safe. So now I want to pose a case study and have a little discussion. I mean, I'm in education. I don't know what everybody else, what your role is, if you're in a school or if you're a mediator or a peer mediator, but think of some common conflicts you might see in class or in school, and how does your school or community usually handle it? So you can either type in the chat pod, or talk out loud.
Well, I can go first, and I can tell you from being a school counselor that I've had to go in and self-regulate the administrators as well as self-regulate the students, because they're both amped up. So you have mirroring neurons, and if you're yelling, then I start yelling, and so I have to go in and I have to talk very softly. And of course, my heart's racing. I'm getting amped up because I'm in the midst of them. But I've had to learn that if I can go in calm as I can be, or appear calm, then that does help, and take the child out and let the administrator calm down many, many, many times.
That's a good point. Karen says we see students isolated and sent to the office, which can exacerbate that. Isn't much mediation. Yeah, the suspension, it's like they just want the problem to be taken out of the school. I know where I live in Martin County in Florida, they do have an alternative suspension program that the therapy, there's a child therapy, Tyson Teens. They do run that, but it's not really a long-term solution. Right? The shaming can't be helpful. And reading this, it doesn't sound very effective to me, like, let's just get the distraction out so we can get back to work, right? So keep this in mind as we go on to the next section on being trauma informed, knowing what we know about how the brain works, especially when there's been trauma or ACEs. The majority of our students are dealing with these things. So yeah, I like that they can ask to leave the classroom. Sometimes if a student has agency to be able to go, to another classroom or somewhere else, that can help too. So does anybody have a school or a place locally that they work with that does trauma-informed approaches to things? There's several groups on Facebook just in the education world. If you look for trauma-informed education, you'll find groups that you can join. Matthew Portal runs, he's a principal, but he also goes and speaks, and he's really leading the way in terms of what it takes to transition schools and districts to being trauma-informed. So this is like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the triangle. And I found this graphic, and I've used it many times in presentations, and you really have to take a bottom-up approach. So what I like to do with my students is to make sure their basic needs are met first. And that comes with, you know, safety, food, making sure it's clean, and not only safe as terms of, you know, like so many schools approach safe in terms of there's a fence, all students have chips with their ID cards and they're tracked and everybody has to scan in and out. But safety is really, how does the student feel when they're sitting in their desk around their peers? Is there conflicts in the classroom? Is it triggering them emotionally? Like, safe, do they feel welcome to participate and be who they are, you know? So how can we meet those kind of basic needs? If you look at the third thing, it says love and belongingness. A huge part of this is relationship. And if you go to some of these groups on Facebook, you're going to see relationship, connection repeatedly, because it really is crucial for teachers and staff to connect with students. Students that are experiencing ACEs and trauma in their communities or at home may not have an adult that they can talk to, or they may not feel like they can open up to anybody. And so they look for that at school. And if we can meet those needs, then they'll be able to grow and, you know, self-actualize. And all it takes is spending time with them, connecting with them. I like to play cards with my students or listen to the music they listen to, or, you know, connect with them and meet them where they're at. And this is from Ask Jan, which is a workplace thing for people with disabilities, but has really great recommendations on the kind of accommodations that people would need in a workplace, but it also falls under the kind of accommodations people would need in the classroom. Not all of our students that are experiencing trauma are going to have an IEP or a 504. So if teachers and staff can just implement and accommodate everybody and realize, okay, well, if our student is stressed out, they may not be able to remember things. That's going to affect test scores and grades. They're not going to be able to concentrate. How can we help them to organize and plan? They may have sleep issues, so let's not schedule things early in the morning, you know, or if they're like constantly absent, it may be because of other stressful things. And I mentioned before about teachers using certain tones. And like Cindy said, if a student is agitated and they responded to agitation, like the noise can be like another thing where it's either going to make them fight more or shut down more. So just kind of like, how can we incorporate these things to make it easier for our students, to make it like less of a load for them, you know, without having to have the whole red tape with IEP and all of that, because not everybody's going to have an IEP. A lot of, especially elementary schools, have calming corners where there's like a bean bag and a rug and little things they can fidget with if they need to go calm down. Middle schools and high schools, you know, like somebody said earlier, like they asked to go for a walk. That's a great way for somebody to calm down. And this is PTSD, not everybody has that, but these are things we can implement in our schools, like just making extra time in class just for connection. Calm dot, I think it's .com, has free accounts for educators, and you can play calming music or do little meditations with your students or breathing exercises with your students. They even have exercises and movements, yoga, that you can do with your students in class. Journaling, I would get those 50-cent, you know, like the notebooks, these ones. They're really cheap, and I just keep them, and my students can write in them anytime they feel like they can't focus. They'll do like a daily pages and write, just brain dump for 5 minutes, and then they feel better. A lot of schools have counselors, not only guidance counselors, but actual counselors in the school. And lifestyle choices like having healthy snacks, that always helps too. So has anybody tried any of these things in your schools?
I'm going to brag about a school in the Central Valley in California. They call it the Bear Cave or the Cave or whatever. And this is a middle school, and it is staffed with counselors and social work folks. So if students are having, you know, experiencing, I'm sure ACE has a lot to do with that, thinking about the community where these students are. They can get a pass, they can go there, and it's a, you know, no questions asked kind of opportunity for them to just come in, get it together, have a drink of water, sit down, have a good cry, whatever it is that they need to do. And there's always, that's always open. And I think it's such a respectful environment. And you think, yeah, I bet kids just come in there and, you know, take advantage. And they really don't. It's really interesting, or at least that's what the counselors have told us, that it's not, it seems to be a respected space, that it's not, I just don't want to do my math right now, so I'm going to go hang out in the, in the cave, right? That there's a sort of, it's been well presented to the teachers and to students, and they seem to use it appropriately. So you can select to go there, or teachers can say, do you think you'd like just a minute away at the cave? And it's seems to be embraced by the teachers and the kids. I'm sure there are some who are like, no, I don't like it, but for the most part, the overwhelming ethos at the school is that that's a good thing to do, to have a place to go and just kind of get yourself together.
That's great. Thank you for sharing. Yeah, I'm actually a math teacher, so I'm very familiar with the anxiety that comes along with math. And I typically have my lights down low, and I usually have some kind of like essential oil, like lavender, you know. It doesn't go for everybody, but my students happen to like it. So it's a very relaxed setting. So I think, especially knowing that we can get mediation into our schools with peer mediation, and train students and staff with conflict resolution. Pairing this with trauma-informed approaches can make a big difference as far as what kind of change we can we can make, you know? So if we think to our case study where, you know, there's conflict in the classroom, in the school, and students are just sent to the office, or if they're suspended, what could have been done differently? What do you think you might try to implement? And I'll start with an example from my own classroom. This past semester, I was working with a group of teens age 16 to 24, and it was a self-contained classroom, and it was very tight knit. And there was a new student, and he kind of rubbed the wrong way. You know, he wasn't accepted immediately into the group. So I started by implementing circles, and training my students on, you know, like peer mediation skills. And we would do a circle at the beginning of the week and at the end of the week, and saying what works well and what didn't work well, and how did, you know, when he said that, how did it make you feel? And the circles turned into daily card games where they would talk as they're playing. And it was just a really great experience for these students to show up and to share so much. And by the end of the semester, they were all very close, including the new student. So I think, and I would include, you know, conflict resolution. What kind of conflict style do you have? Or how is your body feeling? And some would say, oh, well, my chest is tight, or my heart is racing, or I'm tense. And then we could figure out ways that they could use to de-escalate on their own. And I never had any issues. I never had to call, you know, administration to my room. And it worked really well. So Michelle, have you used restorative justice in your school? Okay. Is that Karen? You have a question? I can't hear.
I'm so sorry. The sun is just setting here in
Oh.
California, and I can't get myself in a better spot because I'm plugged in. I'm sorry.
It's okay.
To be so distracting. I apologize.
No worries. I thought you had your hand up. Oh, wonderful. I'm going to have to look into that. I would love if you would share some more about that. The circles being used. I'm actually going to a restorative justice conference this weekend in Florida. So I think it's really important as we start to do some of these things in our schools and in our communities, that we track the data so that we can show people that how it's working. You know, how is it reducing conflict? How is it reducing trauma? How is it increasing test scores? And have networks, like not only in our school, but know what resources we can refer people out to if we can't do it, say, in our school or in our school district. To have ongoing teacher support and education, like what the peer mediation program provides. I think that all teachers should have this as part of their regular teacher training, you know, like social emotional learning and conflict resolution and peace education. There should be people at every single school that are trained in this. And when you combine peer mediation and you give students the ability to solve their own problems, that's going to impact not only the school, but society. You know, it's going to prevent and reduce conflicts outside of school as well as in school. So these are things that we really should be pursuing and hopefully getting grant money to do research on, because it's needed. So thinking about where you are, whether you're California or Missouri, think about what kind of ACEs you see regularly. Like, I know for sure at least half of our students that we deal with are their parents are divorced, you know? So that's just one ACE. Think about the ones whose parents drink alcohol or use drugs or have been arrested, or foster children, you know? And can you think of anything that's like really, really large in your community, like any particular trauma that you might need to address specifically?
I live in a military town, so anytime a parent is deployed,
Mm-hmm.
uh, we're going to see a lot of anxiety in students. And yeah, so I just moved. I lived here before, but I just moved back here. So I forgot about the trauma on these kids that they experience.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's really important, especially like I did research a few years ago where we had each high school that was participating to make a project based on what their individual school needed. So, you know, I could say, well, this is what I see in my community, but if you're seeing something like you're in a military town and there's an absentee parent, plus the fear that something might happen to them. So you can always center your focus on whatever the youth say that they need, you know, and that's really meeting students where they're at.
Yeah, we have a unique population. Again, I'm going back in the Central Valley of California. There are a lot of undocumented peoples, and this current climate out there, that it's been very stressful, and it's not always something that a student wants to come forward and say, this is what I'm thinking about, this is what I'm worried about.
Yeah.
So when you talked to me, your early slide, fight, flight, freeze, I thank you for sharing that again. I mean, I know that, I've heard it, I've seen it so many times, but that reminds me of that sort of that student with the hood up and the head down, and then it's like interpreted as just bad attitude, when I'm sure a lot of it is just, I am overwhelmed. I don't know what to do with this worry.
Yeah.
You know, my uncle got deported, and I don't know if my mom's next, and nobody's talking about it. Nobody wants to tell me what's going on. So it's very real for a lot of our kids in our community.
Yeah, same thing, because I'm in South Florida. So I've definitely dealt with similar things over the past semester. And it's important, you know, like even if they see campus police, they get all just, and then they don't come to class, you know, so it's hard.
Yeah, there's
Yeah.
triggers that you don't even see coming, you know, or a simple question like, hey, what did you do this weekend? Suddenly is like, I don't want to talk about it, you know, or I can't tell you,
Right.
where'd you go for the break? And it's like, I'm not talking to you about it. And so it's not defiance, it's coping with this worry. So yeah, thank you very
Yeah.
much for, that was a really, really important thing for me to see at the beginning of the day today.
Yeah. Other than realizing that students who aren't, say, participating in class or who were exhibiting behaviors, problematic behaviors, knowing that the fight, flight, or freeze is behind it and how the brain works, do you think there's anything that you learned about tonight that you might be able to implement wherever you're at?
I like just the journaling. It's a great idea. I mean, I wrote that for myself, is just get a box of journals and leave them with some of my student teachers, my teacher candidates, and say, hey, have these available for kids so they can process what they're experiencing, and then offer an opportunity to share their worry if they are ready to, when they're ready to.
Right.
good.
Right. And I think like, especially Shamika, checking in and maybe circles, like what Cynthia said, remaining calm, even if your heart is racing. Um, I'm like a super mellow person, even though I'm like inside sometimes, but it makes a big difference, especially if you're doing circles. Like my students felt like they couldn't say anything at first because they didn't want to shock me or they didn't want to upset. You'd be surprised how many kids don't want to upset adults. You know, they're like, are you mad at me? I don't want to make you mad at me. And I'm like, no, I'm not mad. There's nothing you could say or do that would make me think less of you, you know? Like you have choices and it was a good choice or a bad choice and I can support you either way, you know? So the circles and classroom meetings where they just feel safe to share is huge. And it's a really, really important thing. So I'm glad that that's something that you might try. Definitely reach out to Cynthia and check out the resources on the peer mediation online to see what's there. And I'll be sharing some articles over the next month about circles. So feel free to reach out to us and keep this conversation going. Just a quick thing on some resources. Some books that I really like. The Body Keeps the Score by Vanderkolk is really good. It goes into detail about different things people can do to deal with how their body responds to trauma. Hacking School Discipline. There's Restorative Justice for colleges and for schools, some books. Most of these are books. Deepest Wells by Nadine Harris Burke, and she's now the Surgeon General of California, but she's given a TED Talk. So if you just Google TED Talk and ACEs, she will come up and it's really good. Eyes Are Never Quiet is a really great book. I highly recommend that one. So I'll leave it here in case you're trying to write it down. But I share a lot of different things on social media too. So, oh, wonderful. Yeah, there's so many great classes you can take online and videos that you can watch to learn more about trauma and ACEs and education and peer mediation. Thank you for putting the TED Talk link in there. Okay, I think, so last slide. I put up both of our websites. Mine's Trauma Informed Solutions and of course the online peer mediation.org. And some of the hashtags that both of us commonly use are listed, and our handles are at OPMP team and at online peer mediation. And you can find me at Darby Monroe, which is just my name, on most social platforms. So keep in touch and we're here to help if you have any other questions.
Yeah, and so if you have any questions for Darby or for our team, you know, please feel free to put it on the chat or contact us. I put our web, as Darby did, I put our web site up here so that you can always reach out to us.
Yeah.
So we'll give you a minute if you want to ask any questions or unmute yourself or anything you'd like to do at this point. And if you have any resources you would like to share, oh, please, we would love for you to share, because we will actually add resources to our website. If you have anything that would be helpful. So know that as well. So Darby, did you want to say any closing thoughts, any information, additional information you'd like to share before we close our webinar tonight?
just keep checking. I guess we'll share. There's going to be an article series that will go into much more detail on trauma-informed peer mediation. The first article is already posted on both of our websites. So if you would like to learn more about it, you can check back in or follow us on social media and find out more.
Absolutely. And I'll put Darby's article up so that if you want to check it out, it was a really great article. And she's doing a series of articles, and this is the first in that series. We also had a Twitter chat, and that is documented as well. Darby, do you happen to have that transcript for the Twitter chat available? No? Okay, it's okay.
No, I don't.
No problem. Yeah, so but I think we can actually post that link in your next article for sure.
Yeah,
it was really good information. Well, thank you all for being on tonight. I'm going to stop recording